Hey guys, JK95 here. Today I present to you the moment you've all been waiting for. Da 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 da! The JK95 100th video special. So here's how it's gonna go down. First, I'm gonna explain to you the premise of this series I've been working on for the past 4 years. Then I'm gonna read you the first chapter of the first installment of this series. Then I am going to perform one of my songs from my first mixtape live on video for you. And now, without further ado, let's get this 100th video special started! So this grimdark fantasy romance series I've been working on the past 4 years is titled The Blade Saga, and I've completed 2 volumes out of a planned 7-volume series, each with a 6-figure word count, and I'm currently working on the 3rd volume right now. The first volume is titled The Blade of Light, the second one's titled The Blade's Return, and the third one's titled The Blade's Conquest. The series follows my young female protagonist, Paris Rhodes, as she navigates her way through this end-of-days / rebirth of humanity prophecy that's going on throughout my series, and it's set in this medieval fantasy world called Erek. That's E-R-E-Q for those of you who don't understand and want to know the proper spelling. So the first volume of the series, The Blade of Light, Paris is stuck in this totalitarian, theocratic, hellhole empire with like a massive apartheid system between the rich, poor, and a history of like race-based chattel slavery, and that's still going on by the events of the Blade of Light. On the morning of her 18th birthday, Paris gets an invite to join this fight-to-the-death gladiator tournament called the Vixen's Way in the faraway kingdom of Masara, 3,000 miles to the southeast in their capital of Amarna. So Paris escapes with the runaway slave named Amal Bashar. Even though Amal has other plans, Paris joins the Vixen's Way tournament, which is a series of fight-to-the-death matches organized over several weeks, where 500 female warriors basically kill each other in this gladiator-style pit. And the last one standing, married to the handsome 21-year-old Sultan Asil Najad, the first of his name. And upon meeting each other, Paris and Asil are immediately smitten. They fall in love, and they realize that they're the 2 lead figures in the aforementioned prophecy called The Lion and the She-Wolf, which was the original working title of the first book anyway. And Asil starts fixing the tournament for Paris to win while they're secretly going out at the same time. This captures the attention of Asil's older sister Reem, who's married to someone named Hafaz Hakim, the emir of the rival Emirate of Sham, as Hafaz's niece Amira Nasser is competing in the Vixen's Way tournament too. So Reem threatens to expose Asil's match fixing, and things get pretty ugly fast. And that's all I'm gonna say. Will she succeed, and will Paris and Asil end up together? You're gonna have to read to find out. Now I present to you first chapter of The Blade of Light. Chapter 1. Rise of the She-Wolf, Part 1. The Trouble Beginning and the Years of Joy. On the morning of my 18th birthday, I was given a choice. Either spend my entire life in a theocratic shithole empire with a tiny, obscenely rich ruling class and a massive, impoverished working class, or take a shot at a better life, albeit with a very great risk of getting killed along the way. I'm Paris Alexis Marie Rhodes, and my life began on the morning of the 13th of the 2nd month of the year 1203 after the Nephilim's extinction, or Yen for short. Because of the whiteouts that gripped the northern half of the Atlan continent, the 2nd month of the calendar is one of 2 dreaded months. According to my father, Roderick, I was born during a blizzard. My parents and 2 midwives were all trapped inside our little hovel, one of many that littered the estate of Charles Adnet Halcard, the Lord of Avellana and Governor of Galatia. My birthplace was a few hundred feet from the vast Galatian forest that separated us from Sternello. Our home was a one-room hut with a fire pit dug in the middle where we lived, cooked, ate, and slept. The walls were a mixture of mud and straw while the roof was thatched. We only had chamber pots to collect excrement in and a barrel for our semi-annual cold water baths. While the snowdrifts outside reached heights of 15 feet, my mother, Julia, was screaming in pain. Not even the howling winds could mask her cries. Atlan medicine didn't have any effective painkiller since the Kif plant was made illegal during the reign of Marcus Hectorius Caesar, the 11th of his name. That decision was stupid because, according to legend, that plant ended the Atlan-Elysian War, and the Atlan Church only made it illegal so Marcus's rich friends wouldn't go out of business. It's not surprising since the Caesars got dumber with every emperor due to their inbreeding. Because of a series of grueling peace talks, the 10 kingdoms that constitute Eric were formed almost a millennium ago, though the Caesars have been the only ruling the dynasty since. I suppose the supreme deity Aden hated the Atlan Empire, so Aden fucked it up with a corrupt dynasty that refuses to die and deplorable living conditions for most of us. Anyway, my mother Julia barely survived childbirth and died 5 years later at the hands of the Black Cough, which only the resin from the Kif plant could cure. Even if we cured her, my parents would have been sentenced to life in prison with no hope of release. Her tragic death came on a chilly autumn night, and she had to be quarantined from the rest of the family due to the infectious nature of her condition. Papa and I were forced out of the house before the town doctor, the temple preacher, and his acolyte surrounded my mother's bed with black drapes and curtains. When we were allowed back in, the doctor told us we couldn't be within 6 feet of the curtains and we had to accept it. We spent the next 2 hours listening to her loud, hacking coughs. The worst part was that we could see my mother's shadow because the full harvest moon was illuminating the curtains. Eventually she let out one final cough that dwarfed the others as the acolyte performed the final blessing. Moments before the cough took place, she whispered something to my father. I had no idea what was said. Mother vomited up a massive pile of muck and died. She was 31 years of age and my father was 32. The doctor escorted my mother's corpse covered in a cloak and they had the bed escorted to the local temple of Atlas. A couple days later at her funeral, I cried so much that Emerald Lake might have overflowed. It was a closed casket funeral so no one could see the body one last time or say goodbye before she was buried. That was when I collapsed into my father's arms. He spent the next several hours sitting by the spot where my parents' bed used to be and cried so much that his eyes almost dried up while I sat down by the fire alone and afraid. Shortly after I turned 6, I would go with the other young girls after the main worship service to learn the basics of the Atlan language. It wasn't much comfort during the week when I would normally spend my days playing pretend, chasing butterflies, and killing the rats that would come inside our hovel when it was wet outside. At the time, I needed something to do on the 1st, which was the day Aden had designated as the day of worship. Still, I had almost zero faith in the Atlan Church after my mother's death. Papa was a logger, and the trees were sent to be made into paper and firewood. His day began just before sunrise, and he would wash his hands before beginning his mile-long walk to the logging site, since horses are a luxury that the Atlan peasantry couldn't afford. He worked long, harsh hours only to have the governor take half his earnings in exchange for our little hovel and our tiny plot of land, but he'd always get meat pies to take home in exchange for his work. On the 1-year anniversary of my mother's tragic death, we went to the temple cemetery and visited her tombstone. When I saw her grave, more tears filled my eyes as I twirled my loose golden curls of hair. Papa rubbed my shoulders and said, "Don't cry, baby girl. Your mother is now in paradise and in the arms of Artemis. I'm here to watch over you until you come of age." "I know she's in a better place," I cried, "but it's just not the same with Mama gone." "How about this?" Papa asked. "Every year on this day we leave a flower on your mother's grave. I know a spot near my job site where there's some bulbs growing out of control. We can pick one of them. Does that sound good?" "I guess that could work," I answered. "That's right, my baby girl," said Papa. "Now let's go home." Thus began our annual tradition of placing a flower on my mother's tombstone on the anniversary of her death. I was 7 years old when the next time came, and I felt a little sad, but I didn't cry as much as I felt slightly better knowing that she was in the arms of Artemis and her helpers. Afterward, I sat down by the fire while I ate some bread and vegetables. Shortly after the third industry, Papa decided to teach me how to hunt, since it was an activity that he'd do with his friends after work on the last night of every week, especially since one of Papa's friends was a frequent buyer of firewood named Lawrence Albert. Lawrence, or Larry as I called him, was the town butcher and a part-time hunter as he was born into the merchant class. Unfortunately, members of the merchant class were forced into whatever trade they were born into. Larry was a rather stocky fellow of about 5 feet 8 inches tall, was of a reddish-white complexion with brown eyes, a bald head, and a dark brown goatee sprinkled with gray. He had a small pot belly and pecs, despite the fact that his arms looked harder than steel. Larry taught me how to use a bow and arrow, skin animals, and cure the fur, but most importantly, the hunter's code. I remember my first hunting trip like it was last week, and it was one of my best childhood memories. Papa, Larry, and I ventured deep into the Galatian forest one weekend night. There was also a rest stop marking the halfway point on the road that ends at the fence built around the city-state of Sternello, which has been occupied by the Massaran Sultanate for the past 3 centuries. Before I was handed a bow for new hunters and huntresses, Papa showed me how to string and hook an arrow while Larry taught me some basic rules. "Paris, I'm going to teach you the hunter's code," said Larry. "First, make sure the animal is truly dead. You do this by putting your index and middle finger up to its neck to check its pulse. Second, you will use every usable part of the body, which is the fur, bones, and meat. The meat can be used to feed us, the fur will clothe us, and with the bones I'll show you how to make everything from blades to toothpicks. Third, don't hunt animals purely for sport. That's murder in Odin's eyes and will get you sent to one of the first 3 realms of hell. Finally, if you break this code, you will have your bow taken away and you'll never be permitted to use one. You'll also have to pray to Odin and Atlas for forgiveness. They'll find a way to redeem you. That is the hunter's code." "I understand," I spoke. Can I sell the stuff that I make?" "Unfortunately, Atlan law considers women to be property, so no, you can't legally sell your goods," Larry returned. "However, I can sense something different about you, and I can't quite put my finger on it. I'll sell the meat you collect and give you a 5% cut, but you'll have to find someone else to sell the rest, and be sure to bury your money deep in the woods where no one will find it." "Larry's right," said Papa. "You don't want to live here forever, do you?" "No, Papa," I replied. "I'm going to give you the bow and arrow back now, so show your Papa what you got." Papa talked. I'm going to give you a large bag to carry your dead animals in. One thing to remember, though, try to make as little noise as you possibly can." "All right, I'm off now," I said. "May Aden and Prince Atlas bless you." I ventured deep into the forest as the light coming from Larry's torch had dimmed away and could no longer be seen. It got very dark, and I had to rely on the little moonlight that came through the trees. Luckily, I was born with a vastly improved sense of vision and could see through the darkness. At one point, I saw 3 raccoons gathered around a deer corpse and saw an opportunity, since their fur could be made into fancy caps that kept working men's heads warm in the winter. I steadily strung my bow and arrow behind a tree while the raccoons were feasting on some discarded food. I looked at the first raccoon since it didn't see me and shot an arrow that pierced its side, causing death. I quickly knocked another arrow and shot one of the remaining raccoons, but the third one got away. I looked at the footprints after placing the 2 dead animals in the bag and followed them, leading me to a stream where the third raccoon was drinking water from alongside a pair of rabbits. I strung my arrow once more, aimed it at the raccoon, shot it right in the back of its neck, striking its throat. The rabbits were fast moving, so I had little time to string my bow once again and shot them both dead, though the last one almost escaped. I placed them in my bag, filling it up to maximum capacity, and retraced my footsteps all the way back to the road where Papa was standing. Larry and Papa both had massive grins on their faces when they saw that my bag was full, so I emptied it, and out came the dead animals. I killed 3 raccoons and 2 rabbits, therefore making my first hunting trip a huge success, since not many 8-year-old girls could accomplish what I did. I placed the animals in the back of the bag before the 3 of us walked home and talked. "Excellent work, darling," said Larry. "You've already proven yourself to be an excellent hunter, and you're only 8. How much will the villagers like what I'm making?" I asked. "That depends on the quality of your product," Larry answered. "If you come by my shop tomorrow after the worship service, I'll show you how to skin the animals and make the items tomorrow. We all need to sleep, so if you don't mind, please hand your bag to me." "Okay," I said. We arrived back at our shack when the moon had reached its zenith. I was getting tired, so my father carried me to my bedroom, where he placed me on the bed, and I fell asleep after he tucked me in. I had happy thoughts and dreams that night, since I had a good experience, and I was ready to be something in this world. The next day at the temple, I pretended to listen to the temple preacher as he went on and on about Azazel, the embodiment of all things evil, and how to avoid Azazel's temptations. He also told us the creation story in which the Nephilim goddess Masera committed the first sin, and thus her people were inherently evil. After the service ended, Papa and I headed to Larry's shop. Larry's shop was a small mud brick house in the center of town with a wooden shack on the side for storing animal skins and meat. In front of the shack was a table with freshly sliced venison on it, along with some bags of salt designed to preserve the meat, and I also spotted a small outbuilding with a crescent moon on its door. The inside of his home, however, was rather simple, with a clay stove, some wooden furniture, a clay chamber pot, 2 single cots, and a double cot for sleeping. Papa and I followed Larry out to a shack where he pulled out the coonskins and groundhog hides from the first hunt. He showed me a pile of guts along with a metal stretcher and a knife. But I was quick to notice the fact that the hides were stretched quite a bit. I saw a large pile of salt atop one of the wooden counters inside the shack, and that was when he explained the process of making coonskin caps and fur hides. "Alright, Paris, please listen carefully," Larry talked. "As you can see, I already began the first step in making these items, which involves removing the animal skin with a knife and gutting the inside of the hide. But before we can begin making the items, the hide needs to be cured first. This involves using salt to coat every inch of the hides, both inside and out, but this process can take up to 2 weeks, and that's when we can begin the process of making your hats and pelts. However, you need to know the basic parts of a hat first. There's a crown, the headband, and the brim. But this hat will not have a brim since it's a basic skin cap. Second, you need some hard parchment, which I can obtain directly from the logging site where your father works. These pieces of paper mark where we will cut the undesirable parts off and where we will place the crown of the hat. Third, after we cut the undesirable parts of the skin off, we will use blanket stitch to sew the paper to the crown and headband. Finally, we turn the hat inside out, and the process is complete. It's slightly different for pelts, as these are not generally worn on the head. Unfortunately, I cannot sell pelts as I wasn't born into that profession, but I suggest you go on another hunt next week and then maybe hunt something bigger, albeit not too big. If successful, I'll sell the meat and give you your 5% cut." "Why 5%? I questioned. "Well, young lady, as a man of the merchant class, I'm required to give 25% of my sales to the governor in exchange for keeping my home in business. But I don't know how to farm, so I have to buy food from the local farmer's market," Larry answered. "I'm also trying to save up some money for a donkey, since people of the merchant class have a shot at affording them if they save up long enough. And I'll up your cut to 10% once I can afford to purchase one. Horses, on the other hand, are a luxury that only the wealthy, the military, and the religious police can afford. In case you're wondering about that small building with the crescent moon on the door, that's called an outhouse. It's like a chamber pot, but the excrement goes into a hole in the ground. Come back a week from today after the next worship service. For now, you and your father should head home. The sunset is starting." "Okay, see you later," I said. "May Auden and Prince Atlas bless you, Larry," said Papa. "You as well," Larry spoke. "Before you go, I suggest you take some salt home with you." Good idea, Papa, Papa spoke. Papa and I waved goodbye to Larry after he gave us a bag of salt as we walked back to our shack as I sat on Papa's shoulders. We arrived back at nightfall, and the two of us went to bed early as my father had to be up early for work. I spent the next week doing my usual activities of killing the mice and rats that came out of our walls, chasing butterflies, or sitting by the fire daydreaming about leaving Atlas forever. We began our next hunt by sharing a meat pie that Papa received as part of his work bounty, along with some bread and vegetables that we roasted over the fire. This time, however, Papa told me, "You'd better dress warm as it's chilly tonight," before giving me a scarf to wear for the night, and we finished up our meal shortly afterward. I picked up my bow and some arrows before the two of us headed out for another hunt. Papa and I walked the road leading to Sternello for about an hour before venturing into the forest, and as soon as I did, I spotted an adolescent buck. I knew if I killed it, I could not only make a fur pelt, but Larry could sell the meat and let me take the 5% cut he promised. The buck moved away, and I slowly followed into the same stream where my last kill took place before it drank from it. That was when I strung my bow and arrow, aimed it at the buck, and fired the shot. But although I hit the buck in the back, the buck survived. I made my way towards it before petting the buck's head, and I gently slit his throat with the knife, but I was too small to drag the thing over, so I had to yell, "Papa!" multiple times until he came over. He was beyond proud of me for being able to kill a buck, and we spent the next 2 hours dragging it back to our home before we had a talk. "Now, Paris, I'm so proud of you for killing a larger animal. There's endless uses for this creature, but at the same time, I think you bit off a little more than you could chew," Papa spoke. "We don't want the governor or the religious police to find out about your little business. You had to yell for me multiple times, and I hope nobody heard you. However, we'll meet up with Larry tomorrow, first thing after the worship service. You, on the other hand, need some rest." "All right," I said. Upon arriving back at our shack, we managed to get the deer inside because we didn't want anyone noticing it and tipping off the governor. I slept on my cot while Papa coated the dead animal in salt from the bag that Larry gave us before he too went to sleep. We sat through another dreadful worship service at the local temple of Atlas before we headed home to bring the deer to Larry's shack, and although the sun was rather low in the sky when we got there, Larry was impressed with my latest kill. "Congratulations, Paris!" Larry exclaimed. "Though this will not only give me plenty of meat to sell and a hide to make a pellet out of, but I'll have a head to mount on the wall above my fireplace and be able to carve things with the bones. I'll tell you what, I'll skin this for you and sell off the meat. Your coonskin caps and groundhog pelts are also ready about a week early, and they're sitting inside my shack on a shelf. But the deer pelt will take some time, though. You'll have your first cut a week from today." "Thank you so much, Larry," I spoke. "You're welcome, Paris," Larry stated. "For now, you and your papa best be going. It's almost nightfall." "We'll be going now," said Papa. "See you next week," I said. Papa and I walked back home as the sun fell below the horizon and the moon made its appearance. I felt really good that night, knowing I was going to start making money and finally being able to save up to escape when the opportunity arose. But I especially felt great having fur items such as the coonskin caps that I hoped to find a buyer for. The following morning, I ate some bread and vegetables by the fire after Papa left for work. But instead of partaking in my usual activities, I decided to go out on a little stroll wearing one of the coonskin caps that Larry made. I walked past the endless shacks and fields with peasants cultivating their harvests as I ran into 3 peasant women in their late 20s. They all wore shapeless red dresses with girdles and white veils over their heads, but their eye colors were different. One had amber eyes, another had emerald eyes, not unlike mine, and a third had eyes like sapphire. But they were all surprised at me being outside alone. "Hello, little girl," the green-eyed woman said. "What are you doing out here all alone, and where do you get such a quality coonskin cap?" "My mama's dead and my papa's at work chopping down trees," I answered. As for the coonskin cap, I hunted the raccoon myself, and I had my papa's friend Larry make the coonskin cap. I have 2 more coonskin caps at home and 2 groundhog hides, plus there will be a deer pelt ready in a few weeks. I'm looking for a buyer for the fur items, and Larry has promised to sell the meat from the animals I hunt, and I shall receive a 10% cut. "Are you talking about Larry Albert the butcher?" the green-eyed woman questioned. "Why, yes I am." "Why?" I responded. "Why, though?" "You better be careful," the green-eyed woman spoke. "If the governor or any of the religious police see you partaking in such activities, they'll have your father and Larry sent to prison, and you'll be placed in the care of the Atlan Church, but we'll keep your secret. Although we cannot offer you any money for your fur items, We can offer you some biscuits in exchange, and I must say they're quite delicious. What's your name, little girl?" "I'm Paris Rhodes, and thank you for your support," I returned. "What are your names, by the way?" "I'm Deborah Winkle," the green-eyed woman returned. "The other two women are my sisters, Judith and Anna. We make a living sewing clothes while Judith and Anna's husbands are out in the fields. Mine, on the other hand, just perished this year, and our hut went to my only son, who's only 7 years old. Larry, although I've met Larry quite a few times, I'd like to meet your father sometimes." "Well, if you wish to do that, then come see either of us before or after the worship service on the first of the week." I spoke. "His usual outfit is a knee-length tunic, tights, and a coif. He's pale, turns red in the sun, has lank brown hair, bowled on top, brown eyes, and a shadow coat covering his lower jaw." "All right, I'll be on the lookout," Deborah stated. How would you like some of my biscuits, Paris?" "I'd love some." "Well, here you go." Deborah spoke as she handed me some biscuits. "My sister and I have to get going. May the blessings of Auden and Prince Atlas be upon you, girl." "You as well," I said. I gobbled down the biscuits as Deborah and her sisters walked down the road after I gave her my coonskin cap, and the biscuits were delicious. But the best part was that I could taste the fresh butter inside them. After I walked back to my hut and decided to take a short nap since all that walking had made me tired. When I awoke, the sun was almost below the horizon, and Papa had come home from work for the day with his bounty of food that we shared before conversing. "So, Paris, how was your day?" Papa inquired. "It was great, actually. I met a kind peasant woman and her two sisters. They want my coonskin caps, groundhog pelts, and other fur items. But they can't offer me any money, though they said they'd give me butter biscuits in exchange. I tried a few today, and they were beyond delicious. Her name's Deborah Winkle, and she wishes to meet you at the next worship service." "That's some good news," Papa stated. "If you see her before then, tell her I'll be interested in meeting." "I sure will. How was your day?" I said. Same as always," Papa answered. "Just chopping down trees for 11 hours a day. I'm only going to keep doing this until I die. I hope you can escape this land one day." "I sure will," I spoke. The rest of that evening was rather uneventful, and as my bedtime came and I went to sleep on my cot, while my father stayed up a bit longer, I decided to go out in another one of my coonskin caps, and I found Deborah walking down the street with her son. Her son was of a fair complexion, green eyes like that of his mother, and curly auburn hair, but I could only see his face and hands as he wore a knee-length tunic and with tights underneath. "Hello, Paris," Deborah spoke. "As you can see, this is my son. His name is Simon." "Is that another one of your coonskin caps?" "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's nice to meet you, Simon. Well, he would be very interested in one of those coonskin caps." "Yes, indeed," Deborah spoke. "If you follow us back to our home, I'll give you some more biscuits." "I love that," I stated. "By the way, I talked to my papa, and he said he'd like to meet you during the worship service on the first of the week." "Excellent," said Deborah. "Now follow Simon and I to our home, and we'll do the exchange." "Okay," I said. I followed Deborah and Simon to her shack and found it not dissimilar to the one Papa and I lived in. I found Judith and Anna sitting by the fire sewing, and I immediately saw some freshly baked meat pies. Deborah told me, "Go ahead, take one of those meat pies and enjoy." So I did, and boy, were they delicious. However, Simon was looking rather depressed, so I decided to try to have a conversation with him. Hello, Simon. I know what it's like to lose a parent, so I can feel your pain. It hasn't even been a year for me, and I'm crying every night, said Simon. Plus, I've been given all these responsibilities since my mother's legally considered property. I just don't know if I can take it. Believe me, you'll find relief like I did. I learned how to hunt, and I have a guy selling meat from my animals and making fur items from the hides, while your mother's offered to give me some of her delicious butter biscuits in exchange for these coonskin caps. Would you like one? Sure, Simon answered. Here you go, I said as I handed the cap over to Simon. Please don't tell anyone. I won't. I really hope I find some relief, Paris, Simon continued. I'm tasked with keeping track of Judith and Anna's goods along with their husbands' harvests, so when the governor or the religious police come, they'll take half of what we made. Thanks for the coonskin cap, though. That's terrible, I said. No one our age should have to keep track of such things due to some horrible laws, and you're very welcome. Anyways, Paris, would you like to just sit here by the fire for a while? Simon asked. There isn't much else to do. Sure, I replied. Simon and I huddled up by the fire for the next few hours before the sun started getting low, and it was time for me to go back to my home. Upon arriving, I gave Papa a hug before consuming some more buttery biscuits, along with the meat pie he brought home from his work bounty. After finishing our food and feeling full, the two of us began to converse. Papa, remember how I mentioned Deborah Winkle yesterday? I inquired. I do recall that, yes, Papa returned. Well, I visited with her today and met her son, Simon. She's real excited about my fur items. I had told her you'd be interested in meeting after the next worship service. I'm glad you made a friend and someone in the community is interested in your product, but how old is Simon? He's 7, but he's already loaded with responsibilities since his father passed away this year. I responded, I feel really sorry for him. Ah, I see, Papa continued. Anyways, I don't want to go out on another hunt tonight since both of us need some sleep. How about the night before the next worship service? I understand that works for me, I returned. I need to go get some rest. Good night, Papa. Me too, said Roderick. Good night, Paris. I sat down by the fire for a short while before I curled up on the ball of my cot and fell asleep. I spent the time between the first visit and the night before the next worship service visiting with Deborah and Simon, enjoying meat pies and butter biscuits while watching Judith and Anna sew. By the time the 7th night had come, Papa and I both got dressed for the cold weather, gathered our tools, and headed out for a hunt. But this time Larry decided to join us. The three of us made our way up the road until we reached the rest stop marking the road's halfway point before I was handed my bow, arrows, and a knife. I steadily made my way deep into the forest before I spotted a large 8-point buck standing there, eating some leaves from one of the trees. I strung my bow and arrows once more before I aimed at the buck and fired the shot. But although the arrow landed in the buck's chest, it briefly ran off before falling to the ground. I signaled Papa and Larry to come over, and we could all tell that it was still alive. I petted the buck's head for a brief while before I took the knife and gently slit its throat. The three of us dragged the large buck back to our hovel before Larry told us what we were going to do next. Ah, Paris, I'm so pleased this is your best kill to date, Larry talked. I'm able to sell plenty of meat, make wonderful pelts from this creature, and be able to make carvings from the bones. During the past week, I was able to purchase a donkey that's currently residing in a pen behind my home, so I'll have an easier time getting to you. I'll drag this buck back to my shack so I can skin it, gut it, cure the fur, and cut up the meat. Your deer pelt from your last kill will be ready tomorrow, and now I'm going to give you your first cut of meat sales. Thank you, I exclaimed. You're welcome, Larry spoke. I'm handing you a bag with your cut of the sales, and after the next worship service, come by my shack to collect your deer pelt. I must be going now. May Auden and Atlas bless you. You too, I said. Stay safe now, Larry. Don't let the religious police see you. No need, Roderick. I am excellent at avoiding detection despite my advanced stage. Whatever you say, Larry, said Papa. Larry gave me a small bag before dragging the 8-point buck back to his workshop, and when I opened the bag, I found 10 gold Atlan crowns and 20 silver crowns. Once Larry had gone back to his place, Papa and I got huddled up on our cots and went to sleep. Upon waking up the next morning, the two of us had some gruel before walking to the temple, and once inside, I spotted Deborah, Simon, Judith, Anna, and their husbands. Papa and I then took our seats next to the Winkles before the service began. The service once again dealt with the temptations of Azazel, why anything remotely pleasurable is sinful, how evil the descendants of Masera are, and why the Atlan Empire is superior to the 9 other kingdoms. I had begun to believe that the temple preachers were repeating the same message non-stop to dumb down their followers to the point where they wouldn't even dream of rebelling. As soon as the service ended, I introduced Papa to the Winkles, and it went over much better than I thought it would. So this is the fine lady who buys my daughter's products, Papa asked. You look a lot younger than I imagined. And this is the man who's been working hard chopping wood and raising a girl without a mother, Deborah spoke. I must say, you're doing an excellent job. Thank you, Papa talked. I highly commend you for doing such a fine job raising Paris, providing her a hobby and a source of income, Deborah stated. I'm also proud of your friend Larry for putting his business and life on the line to ensure that Paris has a future. Unfortunately, I can't give Paris any Atlan crowns for the fur items, but I've been giving her buttery biscuits and she loves them. Paris has told me about your buttery biscuits. I'd have to try them sometime, Papa spoke. What do your sisters do for a living, and would you be interested in visiting my place sometime? My sisters sew clothes that they distribute to the villagers while their husbands are out in the fields, Deborah responded. My husband passed away this year, and my son Simon has been given all these responsibilities since he's the man of the house. As for your other question, I'd love to visit sometime, especially if you have more fur items available. Paris and I are heading over to Larry's workshop to pick up a deer pelt, and he's working on another one as we speak. We must be going but before we do, I'd like to say I'm Roderick. May the blessings of Auden and Prince Atlas be upon you. You as well, said Deborah. Papa and I waved goodbye to the Winkles before we began our walk to Larry's workshop. Upon arriving there, we found a deer pelt from the previous week sitting on the table in front of his shack, and the one from my kill from the night before hanging inside the shack. I also spotted another bag sitting on the table, and Larry brought out his donkey before we conversed. Greetings, Roderick, and hello, Paris, Larry spoke. As you can see, your deer pelt from last week is ready, and I just started curing the fur from last night's kill this morning. I was also able to sell the meat I extracted from the kill, and you have another cut sitting on the table right in front of you. Go open it up. Papa collected the completed deer pelt, and I collected the bag before opening it. Inside, I found 20 gold crowns and 41 silver crowns, so my pupils grew large as I became ecstatic. I ran up to Larry and gave him a big hug before I said, "Thank you, Larry, I'm so excited." "You're welcome, Paris, but please find a place to keep your money safe. Larry talked. It won't be long before the religious police start poking their noses around. Don't worry, I have a safe place to keep him, not telling anyone, including Papa," I stated. If the religious police are around, I know of a spot in the woods where I'll bury any money I make. Very well, Larry spoke. I'd best get back to my business. Next time you come, you can pet the donkey if you like. His name is Gus. Go in peace now, you two. You as well, Papa spoke. Papa and I took the finished deer pelt, beginning our walk home as Larry went back to curing the fur, though I looked forward to seeing more of Gus the donkey. The sun had fallen below the horizon, and the two of us roasted vegetables in a pot over the fire before eating them with some bread and water. I went to stash the money I made so far under my cot before getting huddled up and falling asleep. 2 weeks later, after sitting through another dreadful worship service, the two of us went back to Larry's shop to collect a new deer pelt while Papa was busy conversing with Larry. I was having a blast petting Gus. Gus's fur was rather greasy, albeit kind of soft at the same time, though he really seemed to enjoy when I pet his head and scratched behind his ears. But I stayed away from his posterior as I didn't want to get hit with random excrement. Once Papa and Larry had finished their conversation, Deborah and Simon showed up to buy some meat before we finished up. Papa and I took the newly made deer pelt from the 8-point buck and went home as Deborah and Simon followed us. Once we got back inside her hovel, I noticed Deborah had a large bag with her, and as soon as Papa gave her the 2 deer pelts, she gave me the bag. Upon opening it, I found 35 butter biscuits and a large meat pie that was still somewhat fresh. The 4 of us sat down by the fire, so we each got a quarter of the pie, while Simon and I chowed down the butter biscuits like a pair of ravenous wolves. Papa and Deborah sat down to discuss adult stuff while Simon and I stayed by the fire. We even briefly touched each other's hair, and I must say that I've been attracted to curly-haired boys ever since. After Deborah and Papa finished up their conversation, Deborah told Simon it was time to go, and although Simon was resistant at first, he eventually obeyed his mother. The rest of the night was rather uneventful, as I felt incredibly full after the piece of the pie and all those butter biscuits. I went to bed early that night, and I was sleepy from the food that I ate and felt great. I started a routine of hunting on the 7th night of every week with help from Papa and Larry, and I was able to accompany us with these thanks to his new donkey. Over the next 4 years of my life, I hunted raccoons, rabbits, squirrels, and deer, while Larry did the grunt work, making fur pelts and cutting up the meat to sell to his customers. Meanwhile, after attending worship services and language lessons, Deborah would give me tons of butter biscuits in exchange for my pelts, and during those 4 years I watched my father's friendship with Deborah grow into love, while Simon and I continued to bond. By the time of my 12th birthday, I had accumulated 2,000 gold crowns and 5,000 silver crowns. But I knew I couldn't hide them inside my home, so I took them deep into the forest one night to bury them. I found the perfect burial spot in front of the hollowed-out tree before I dug a 3-foot deep pit with a shovel I purloined from my papa's work tools and threw the bags of money inside. I refilled the hole before patting down the ground and covering it with leaves. But as I was leaving, something happened that I thought would result in my premature death. I was approached by a massive wolf with fur blacker than ebony and eyes greener than unpolished emeralds. I backed away from it before I was cornered inside the hollowed-out tree with no means of escape, and I thought for sure I was going to die, so I stuck my hand out with nothing to lose. However, just when I thought the wolf was going to bite my neck open, it started licking my face and allowed me to pet its plush black fur. A thought came into my head, and the wolf looked at me as if it knew what I was thinking. I was shocked when I looked in its eyes, but what really startled me was When I looked the wolf in its eyes, I heard a feminine voice in my head speak, "I am yours, your majesty." I realized I had magic powers that allowed me to not only communicate with wolves, but allow them to do my bidding. I started to walk home after that, and the wolf followed me as I thought, "Why do you call me your majesty?" To which I heard the same voice say, "You're our queen. Every other wolf in all of Eric knows you're the promised one from the restoration prophecy, and we're yours." I never paid attention to religious matters, so what is this prophecy? I questioned in my mind. Plus, I'm only 12 years old, and how does every wolf in the world know? "You'll know the prophecy in time," the wolf's voice played in my head. "And like I said before, you're one of the 2 figures promised to this world." "2 figures?" I asked in my head. "Yes, but you'll know the other one when you're older," the wolf replied in my mind. "Just know that in your heart that you'll get out of Atlas one day. When that day comes, you can command me or any wolf in the forest to safeguard your escape." The wolf and I arrived back at my hut shortly after that, and the wolf licked my face once again before I kissed its forehead. When I went inside, I found my father having a conversation with Deborah while Simon was asleep by the fire. I asked my father what they were talking about, and he responded, "Sit down for this, Paris." "What's the matter, Papa?" I asked. "Is something wrong?" "Unfortunately, yes," Papa answered. "Larry was approached by the religious police about his recent collection of deer heads from your kills and was beaten into confession. They know about your business. They hope you buried your money in a good hiding spot." "I just knew this day would come, and I sure did hide the money quite well, actually," I spoke. "What happened to Larry?" "Larry's currently on house arrest, and I fear not only for Simon's safety, but for mine as well," Deborah responded. "However, I'll leave it to your father to explain the rest." "The rest of what?" "While you were out, a religious policeman came by and said that the governor is quite impressed by Paris's ability, so he's willing to spare Deborah, Larry, and I prison time if you can be of service to him," Papa returned. "What kind of service? I do not know. But the officer said it will be a chance for you to experience what it's like to be part of the Atlan upper class and all it has to offer." "Do I have to?" I angrily asked. "Unless you want 3 of us to go to prison and be placed in the care of the Atlan Church, you have no choice." "All right, I'll do it whatever it is," I stated. However, I have some news of my own. When I went out to bury my money I earned from selling fur items, I encountered a giant, black-haired, green-eyed wolf, and I discovered I have the ability to telepathically communicate with wolves. "Don't speak of such things, Paris," Papa commanded. "The Atlan Church will consider you a witch and burn you at the stake." "That's so horrible," I cried. "I know I can communicate them. The wolf even said I was their queen and one of the 2 promised ones from the prophecy." "I'm sorry if I'm being stern with you, Paris, but if the Atlan Church heard you saying that, then they'll execute you for witchcraft." "What prophecy did this wolf speak to you about?" "She told me that every wolf in Eric knows who I am and that they're mine to command," I replied. "As for the prophecy, she said I'd know in time." "Okay, Paris," Papa went on. "There's a prophecy called the Lion and the She-Wolf regarding the restoration of Odin's original covenant, and part of it sounds just like what you described. But the last woman claiming to be the She-Wolf was tried for witchcraft and fled into a cave at Lord Chamberlain's Cove, where she died. This occurred during the lifetime of Alexander Rhodes." "That's sad, but I think I'm a part of the prophecy," I spoke. "I can feel it." "Very well," said Paris. "You and Simon go get some sleep while Deborah and I shall stay up talking. Good night, my darling angel." "Good night, Papa," I said. I immediately went to my cot and fell asleep that night. I had a dream where I was surrounded by wolves bowing to me as if I were their goddess. It felt wonderful to have power over anything, even if it was in a dream. But I was approached by several members of the Atlan religious police, and the wolves managed to lunge at their throats, killing all except one. The last religious police officer approached me holding a massive blade that was almost 3 feet long before taking off his kettle hat and rolling down his chainmail hood. The officer's skin was whiter than the perpetual snow cover of the Ashan Highlands. His deep-set eyes were a pale blue, his nose long and narrow, his lips shriveled, but his most striking feature was his shaven head and hairless face. His uniform consisted of a red surcoat bearing the black cross of Atlas, a steel cuirass underneath, a crimson cape, chainmail, knee pads, elbow pads, and steel boots. I was cornered as the wolves surrounded me, and the officer hastily cut down the wolves with his blade in one hand and in addition to another equally large blade in the other. But just as he was about to kill me, I felt a sharp pain in my crotch as if I was being stabbed. Before I woke up, and when I did, I found a puddle of blood in my bed coming from my vagina. That morning I screamed for Deborah and Papa before they came over and saw what had happened. Papa whispered into Deborah's ear before leaving the room, and that's when I knew that I had begun the process of becoming a woman. Deborah and I discussed what had happened next. "What's going on, and why did I wake up to blood spilling out of my girl parts?" I questioned. "I don't even know how to process this." "Well, Paris, allow me to explain. You officially hit what's known as puberty and are capable of reproducing. However, although your body is developing into a woman, you're still legally considered a child until you reach the age of 21, and even then you'll still be seen as property, as am I. You'll be forced to wear this white veil over your head along with the same red flowing dress and girdle that I do. Let me tell you that it's very uncomfortable. However, the worst part is that when you do turn 21, provided you don't succumb to any of the major diseases, you won't get to choose your husband. It's all arranged, and you won't have any way out unless either you or your husband dies. You'll be stuck inside caring for your children while your husband is out in the fields until the day you die, and that's if you don't die in childbirth. That's the grim reality of life in the Atlan Empire, and it's been that way since the Caesar dynasty began its despotic rule. But there's hope for you given your special abilities and your hidden treasure. I hope you will one day escape this dreadful land." "I know I will," I said in tears. "Do you have any peasant dresses and veils?" "I have one with me right now," Deborah replied. "Do you wish to try it on?" "Might as well," I returned. I tried on the red dress after changing out of my usual one before I put the veil and girdle on. Let me say that it was incredibly uncomfortable, not to mention extremely humiliating. Shortly afterward, Papa had come in and told us, "Ladies, please finish up in there. The religious police in here and the governor is outside with his sons," before the two of us followed Papa outside. Once outside, we found 4 religious policemen on foot bearing the crimson standard of the Caesar dynasty, depicting the black cross of Atlas, and I saw they all wore the same uniform from my dream. Not to mention they were all white and clean-shaven. In between the religious policemen was the governor himself and his 2 sons, all on horseback. But I was quick to notice that one of his sons looked significantly older than the other, and that they had an odd smell that was slightly better than everyone else. The governor himself was rather tall, at least 5 inches taller than my father, had a ruddy complexion, long dark brown hair with sprinkles of gray, a receding hairline, dark brown deep-set eyes, and a shadow of stubble covering his lower jaw. His arms were neither large or small, and the same with his legs, but he was corpulent in the midsection. He wore a brick-red vest with a ruffled collar and cuffs underneath a colossal black fur coat, black trousers, and boots. His older son appeared to be in his early to mid-teens, and my face was blushing. He also possessed white skin, albeit with a full head of loosely curled black hair, grassy eyes, and the beginnings of a mustache. He wore the same coat and trousers and boots as his father, but his vest was a rather pale yellow in color, and he wore a white lace neckband tied around his neck. The younger Halcard brother looked to be the same age as me, or maybe a year younger, but I noticed a striking resemblance between him and his father. He had his father's exact hair and eyes, but the only difference is this boy's hairline was rather low. Other than that, he had the same outfit on as well. When their horses stopped whinnying, Charles got off of his, looked at us for a long while, and opened his mouth to speak. So, these are the simpletons who think they can rise up the social ladder. Charles spoke, Roderick Rhodes, and Deborah Winkle. In case the temple preachers haven't been clear enough, there is no moving up the class pyramid, and anyone who attempts to do so will be dealt with accordingly. Your friend Lawrence the Butcher is on house arrest. I'm prepared to send the three of you to Atlan Prison for trying to move up the pyramid and place your daughter Paris in the care of the Atlan Church. However, I will pardon you of these crimes if your daughter can be of service to me. What kind of service, may I ask, me lord? Papa asked. Just by looking at her, I could say she's beautiful for a peasant girl, and judging by her clothes, I know she's already bled. Charles answered. She's also got curves coming in under that dress, and her eyes are perhaps one of the most beautiful things I've seen in my life. So if you, Deborah, and Larry wish to be pardoned for your crimes, I would like for her to serve as my cupbearer until she reaches the age of 21. Then she will be returned to you. Do you accept his terms, Paris? Papa inquired. Yes, Papa, I returned. I'll do whatever it takes to keep the three of you out of prison. I'll get to at least see what it's like to be a part of the Atlan elite. Paris has accepted your terms, me lord, Papa spoke. Very well, Charles stated. Before we leave for my estate, I'd like to introduce you to my sons. My older son is the one with the curly hair and green eyes. His name's Maximilian, and he's 15 years old. My younger son looks almost exactly like me, and his name is Jean-Philip. He's also 12 years old, and you'll be sharing a horse with him for the ride over. Now it's time to say goodbye to your father and for your friends until you turn 21. Goodbye, Deborah, I said with tears in my eyes. Make sure Simon has a good life as well. I'll try, Deborah cried. Goodbye, Papa. I'll miss you the most, and I'll promise I'll find a way. I know you will, my darling angel, Papa said with tears rolling down his eyes. I gave Papa a hug and a kiss on the cheek before a religious policeman dragged me away, and I climbed atop Jean-Philip's horse. He told me, since you've never ridden a horse before, please grab onto my waist. As we began our ride to the Halcard estate, I spent the horse ride daydreaming about my eventual escape, getting a taste of the good life, and spending time inside a mansion, but I had no idea it would be a total nightmare. And that is the end of Chapter 1. If you like that, be sure to hit me up on any of my social media accounts. I know there were a few spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes in there that I'm going to work to fix. And now, without further ado, the next part of the JK95 100th Now, the second part of the JK95 100th video special, I will be performing my song Intoxicate Like a Drug live before you momentarily. But before I do, Intoxicate Like a Drug is the very first thing I uploaded to SoundCloud, and I did an updated version for my first mixtape titled Lusby Commons, which now I have decided is coming out on December 31st, 2019, just in time for New Year's Eve as a way to close out the year and ring in the new decade by default. Bring in the roaring 2020. And now, I present to you Intoxicate Like a Drug. It's JK95 in the house. Baby, intoxicate. Like a drug, bro. Intoxicate. Yeah. Baby, intoxicate. Like a drug, bro. Intoxicate. Yeah. Intoxicate. Yeah. She done walk up in the club. First look, she hook you like a drug. Her eyes greener than a flawless emerald. Her curly hair colored like gold. Her lipstick brick red like burgundy. She a poet like Dante Alighieri. Her intelligence rivals Einstein. She could get away with the perfect crime. Her skin wheatish like Camilla. That flower so sweet like vanilla. Double D's bouncing up and down. Love handles tummy slightly round. She got them long legs, thighs rubbing together. She got a booty like Serena. Ladies kill the beer. Guys kill each other cause they wanna. But she only like a guy who really know her. Pleasure her succeed, she return the favor. Babe ain't looking for no game player. She talk her behind the back. She gon' find you. She knee you in your junk and kick you in your neck. Grab her without permission. Lose a hand. She keep it as a trophy. She got your band. She talk a creed. Get ready to bleed. She talk a family. She break your dick. Don't even try to play a trick. Baby know them all, she a magician. She got that heightened sense of intuition. She can be a slice of heaven or eternal hell. What's your choice? Only time will tell. Yup, baby like a drug, alright. She intoxicate, that's for sure. It's JK95 on the beat. Peace out. Well, that is my 100th video special, folks. I gave you the premise of my first novel titled The Blade of Light, revealed the title of my series, The Blade Saga, read the first chapter, and performed my song Intoxicate Like a Drug from my SoundCloud profile, and my first mixtape live, and my first mixtape is now coming out on 12/31/2019 to close out the decade and bring in the roaring 2020s. One last thing before I end this video. To those of you who did the Titanic movie essay I assigned, I will be grading them in the next video, and I will reveal who got an A+ and who got an F-. JK95 here.